welcome to the show where we shine a light on the biggest barriers and obstacles that get in the way of getting things done. What I like to call monsters and myths, simply because they exist and thrive in the shadows of organizations and in life itself, actually, because very few people are brave enough to step forward and do something about them. So we always look for the magic from people that have managed to overcome these monsters and myths. And today's guest is full of fire. She is an internationally acclaimed author, founder and CEO of Unconventional Ventures, podcast host of an amazing podcast called One Vision. Not often that I give a shout out to somebody else's podcast there. Welcome to the show, Theo.
Thank,
Please tell our audience a little bit about yourself and how you got here before we get into your biggest barriers and obstacles.
thank you so much for having me, Andrew. Um, what do I do? I need to find a succinct way of explaining it, like you do, so that I can actually explain to people what it is that I do. Before I do that, though, disclaimer, I did not start in banking, so do not hold that against me. I tell people that all the time. I spent 15 years in tech, specifically telecom, before I moved on to startups and nonprofits. And then I decided that, hey, I want to have a say so in what I do and I want to control how I use my time. So I started the company. This was back in 2016. And there was a story behind the name. It's for a split second, I did think about starting a fund, and then realized I would be completely out of my depth. But what do I have? I have network. I have an understanding of what people need. I have an understanding of the gap that needs to be closed before we can get people what they want and need, specifically towards financial inclusion. And so that's why the company is called Unconventional Ventures, is looking at things that people don't typically think about. People don't think about financial inclusion. People don't think about older adults. People don't really think about the needs of women and immigrants and those who are not banked. And that's why I am. And I've been lucky enough to have my voice somewhere here and there, and to be able to publish 2 books now with Colgan Page. And, I feel privileged to have that space. I truly do.
And you possibly left out one of your biggest attributes. For those people that are listening instead of watching, you're going to have to get onto the YouTube channel to have a look at what is in the back of Theo's office, because it is full of Lego Star Wars specifically models, but I mean huge. I spy a Millennium Falcon there, and I think that there's a Walker down the bottom there,
Yep.
and
In the process. Uh-huh.
there is, yes, and I believe there's a Death Star somewhere that the bunny jumps over. So
Yes.
just
And a Star Destroyer and R2, two R2s.
that's it. And just for clarification, the audience of this podcast comes from a huge variety of industries, not just financial services. Actually, I think only a few of them are in financial services. So you are speaking to a very wide audience, and I think quite a few of them, I know one in specific is a massive Lego fan, so he's going to definitely be getting onto the YouTube channel to have a look at your collection there. But enough of that. Let's get into the the things that have gotten in your way. I'm not going to ask you to tell everybody how old you are, but let's just say you've been in the business for a couple of decades. Your career spans a few decades, um, and there's been some big monsters and myths that have hampered things that you've tried to change in the past. So let's get into it. Tell us, what is the first biggest monster and myth?
Back to your question. I am a proud, going to be half century old. Awesome. Yes, my birthday is coming up in November, and I look forward to actually getting on stage that week in London and tell people, hey, yeah, I'm turning 50 this week, invite me. Maybe
Nobody's
not
going to
exactly in those
believe you, of
words.
course. They're going to want to see your birth certificate because
Passport
that
and
is.
all of that. Yes, I do have the Asian genes. So that's a good thing. No, so I have been in working, I would say in the industry. I've been working for a few decades. So I've went through the start of the dot-com days, the dot-com crash, and the beginning of fintech. And I don't even know where we're right now. I actually, can we just banish the word fintech because it doesn't really mean much anymore? Anyway, I got distracted. I think the first thing I would like to say, I thought about this, by the way, backdrop. I thought about, should we talk about AI? Should we talk about the metaverse? Should we talk about algorithms? Should we talk about embedded finance and all of that? Because that's what people expect to hear, right? These are the bad things, or culture, or digital transformation. What does that mean? I'm going
But
to bring us
you
back to
are
the basic.
unconventional ventures. So
Exactly. And I cause trouble. See, the first monster is predator, not predator in the sense of a dinosaur, but predator in terms of those who have the power to govern the direction of the ecosystem, those who have a say so in what gets done and what doesn't get done, those who can control who gets promoted and who doesn't, those who can control how you use technology and for whose needs it serves. And predominantly men.
now it
I'm
should,
pausing there
yeah,
for dramatic effect.
and as you were describing all of those attributes, and this is one that I really I want to get into because I don't know why, but nobody's ever brought that up on the show before. And yet I know it happens. I'm a husband, a father of 2 daughters, a brother to 6 sisters, and I know through their lived experiences, I don't have to live through it to know what happened to them. I hear the stories all the time. And yet nobody is brought up specifically, and it is largely a gender thing. It's men, a particular kind of men, a particular behavior that gets in the way of a lot of people, not just, although predominantly they get in the way of women because of their attitudes, but not just women, they get in the way of other men as well because of a particular behavior. But can you share with us just a couple of examples of what you mean, your lived experiences or those of people that have recounted things to you, just so that people understand that there is no um, there's no denying what it is that you're saying, because nobody can say, oh, that's a load of nonsense. They can't be dismissive about it. You've lived through it. What's happened?
I feel like this is a therapy session. Let's see. How much time do you have, Andrew? Jokes aside, I would preface this by saying, if you are a woman working in an industry, and if you had not been through at least one of the following, you're either oblivious or you are just freaking lucky. Congrats, my friend. Oh my goodness. So where do we start? When I first started in tech, this is before fintech, I had so this, you don't think it's 50. Imagine when I was 20s, what do I look like? I had gotten mistaken as EA before. I had gotten asked by people to go fetch coffee, take notes. I had gotten advice on how I'm supposed to dress, and where I'm supposed to position myself amongst men in tensed negotiation situations and circumstances to ease the pressure. I'll put it nicely. I had gotten cornered in bathrooms to the extent I had to lock myself in multiple times until help arrived. I had gotten cornered in client sponsored dinners to the extent that I could not escape. I had gotten stalked in hotel rooms to the extent that I needed my colleagues to come rescue me and walk me back to my room to make sure that I was safe. You want to go on? this is a woman working in tech in and out industry where every single moment when you're out there, you have to do a mental exercise, a mental gymnastics to think about what situation am I going to put myself in to keep myself in trouble. I've learned to excuse myself before dessert because that's typically when things happen. I've learned to now, even more so, surround myself with women. I've learned not to go out dinner with men. I have learned a variety of things just to keep yourself safe or not into getting into a situation where things would be mistaken. And every time when you meet someone, you always think, well, do they come and want to talk to you because they're genuinely interested in what you're doing? Or are they thinking about something else? When people ask for things, when they ask for your contact, which is really common, right? That's how you get business done. What would you expect afterwards? If you get into an elevator with someone in a conference, in a hotel, what could happen? It's nonstop. And I think that's what kills people. I've had people who came to me right after Me Too that happened in the US that said she got propositioned the day when the news broke in a dinner in San Francisco. And it never stopped, right? And so it goes back to I think everyone who works in our industry, whether or not you're a man or woman, most likely you have either experienced something or you've seen something that happened. The question is, why the hell has it not changed?
So I can't even. It's, it, it's seldom I'm at a loss for words. I'm quite verbose normally, but it's a mixture of disappointment, anger, shame, all of the above. That that anybody is feels that way in a social or in a corporate setting. Anybody gets put in that situation for whatever reason, and I'm embarrassed, ashamed on behalf of my gender historically, particularly. But it is, and I am generalizing, because bizarrely this week, uh, somebody, a lady at an event that I was at, turned around and she said, um, "Can you tell me whether there are any other people like you of your age group?" And I thought, what's she getting at? And she looked me square in the eyes and she said, "Not a dick." And I went, I beg your pardon? And she said, "Seriously, when I meet people of your age group and it goes beyond, in my particular case, yes, I'm an old white guy, right? For those that weren't watching the YouTube, that might come as a surprise. I don't think so. But I'm an old white guy, and therefore I understand I've had a lot of privilege in life, just by nature of uh, where and when I was born and who my parents were. Um, but I had never really considered um, the privilege, male privilege, until I actually had, uh, well, had my wife in the work environment, firstly, which is decades ago. We are older than you. And then having children that enter the work environment. that's when it really struck home, because it was decades later, after my wife and I got married. My wife and I have been together since we were in school in the same class together since 12 years old, and we've been together as a couple since 16. So I, you know, we are equal partners in everything that we do, and I thought that that was the way that things were. There is no one better than the other, in any way, shape, or form, until I entered the work environment. And back in those days, I was complicit for doing nothing. And it's only really, as I said, when my kids, my two daughters, when they entered into the workplace, when I realized this is not, this isn't right. And shame on me for it taking so long for that penny to drop, because by that time I was in my late 30s, and it took that long for the penny to drop, to go, this really isn't right. And ever since then, I haven't kept my mouth shut when I see something that isn't right. And yet, one of the things that you've just said there is, people have seen those things happen, but they haven't done anything about it.
Yeah.
So we know the impact of that kind of predator behavior in a social setting and in a work setting, where it's even, can't even say it's even more inexcusable. It's inexcusable in either setting. But that kind of behavior, for that still to be commonplace in the society that we live in, because I know that culturally in certain places of the world, it's not my place to comment on their beliefs and maybe religions or something that dictates a particular way. But you and I, we live in the Western world, and people still think it's acceptable just to sit around and do nothing. Have you ever managed to? Because I'm horrified at the thought that you even have to excuse yourself before dessert and leave. I mean,
I don't stay unless I know I have someone there with me all the time that they won't leave. But
that
otherwise, I
really
don't. I've learned.
that angers me. What can we do? How can we change? What can we do? Because I think I've repeated this to you before. There's an old saying that for evil to flourish, all that it takes is for good people to do nothing. I like to think of myself as a good person, and I don't do nothing. But what can we do more? How are we going to change this? Because this is a major obstacle. This is a major obstacle in getting anything done.
It is, and we wonder why there are not more women in our space, and we wonder why people do drop out, and we wonder why sometimes you just can't find women in some of these social settings, and et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. And you wonder why it's going to take 169 years to close the economic gap in the world. And you wonder why it's going to take 131 years to get to gender parity, if at all. That is, I won't see it in my lifetime. My kids will not see it in their lifetime, and neither will their children if they do live that long. Why is that? It hasn't changed. It has not budged. It's a power imbalance. It's not a lack of awareness, as we talked about before. We're all aware. If you had not seen anything, you had not heard anything, you're blind. I'm sorry. You have to have seen something. Everyone has. Whether or not you choose to do something about it, whether or not you choose to step up, and whether or not you choose to look away, that's your choice. Just like how one of my favorite topic, which is not a pleasant topic, one of my favorite topic is financial inclusion and inequality. Inequality is a choice, not a choice by the people who are suffering, but a policy choice. Is absolutely policy choice. You design a policy in a way that favors certain demographics of people, and you choose to look away and abandon the rest. That is a policy choice. Same with gender. You choose to have a environment, an economy that favors certain demographics of people, and you ignore creating an infrastructure to support people that are working, that are women, who are underprivileged. And you create a certain imbalance situation in terms of power, in terms of access to education, in terms of access to employment opportunities. That also is a choice. So we actively, in a society, as citizens, we actively choose the path that we put everyone in. And I don't know if there's a way out. I don't. I've tried. Trust me, I've tried.
But there has to be a way out. I mean, should we talk about some of the ways out that don't work? Maybe those are myths. Because, you know,
So I'll
you
give
could
you,
have
yeah.
you could have, appraisal system in the organization where they go, we don't have mental physical abuse, we don't have bullying in our organization because we do a 360 staff survey every year, and we've got a you know a gold award for best employer and all of this. And in my mind, I look at those and I go, what a load of bollocks. Because I've never I've never seen any of those actually done in a way that would solicit the truthful responses from employees.
Mhm.
Everybody would be terrified of saying, you know, Bob in the corner feels me up every time I go past the desk, or, maybe it's not quite as overt as that these days. It used to be 30 years ago, though. That was perfectly acceptable. You know, young lady walks past the desk, give her a slap on the bum or something like that. Seemed to be, but we've seen enough TV programs where that was, that behavior was perpetuated. That's not okay. But in a work environment, there's all of these, well, we've got these surveys and we've got this clinic set up, and we do this mandatory training for everybody, and we tell all the guys that this isn't okay and all the rest. But you say that has done nothing to
Because it's
change
not
behavior.
meant to change behavior. It's meant to cover their asses. I'm sorry. Don't, you can bleep me out. It is meant for corporate protection,
I'm
to
not
protect
bleeping.
themselves from lawsuit. It's not meant to actually teach you how to be a decent person. Policy does not teach you how to be a decent person. It doesn't, right? If by now, as an adult, you're working and you still don't know exactly how you're supposed to treat the other people, I'm sorry, no policies can change that.
I'm actually putting that down as the myth of policy.
That is
We,
true. See, I told you things will come up.
we
Um,
know that this is a completely unstructured conversation, and
I like unstructured. It's all the corporate training, isn't it? Compliance training, all the stuff that we need to do every year. Check the boxes, click next. Oops, you got one wrong. We do it again.
that does jack shit about changing behaviors.
We do it
What
to check the
can?
box so that our boss doesn't get sued.
I mean, seriously, you've got children, right?
Uh-huh.
You've got daughters. Daughters? One daughter?
One daughter, one son.
Sorry, one daughter, one son. My apologies. I've met your
That's
daughter, I
okay.
haven't met your son. So she enters the workforce in 10 years' time or so.
I'll tell her to not do what I do.
How are you going to? Yeah, but so are you saying that this is specific only to the industry that you work in? Is this particularly prevalent in STEM related
I don't.
topics? I think that there might be a huge outcry. I can sort of hear it from now from people listening, going, "You better believe it." One of my daughters works in the hospitality industry. I can tell you when she told the story, she is diminutive in heart. I think she'd probably take you up to your ear hole only. She's tiny. And
Even smaller than me.
she was working, she was doing an internship in a kitchen, and the one of the big burly chefs thought it was hilarious to pick her up and put her in an empty pot that was standing on the floor. It's a massive pot. I mean, but the pot was higher than she was. Okay, um, and she couldn't get out. She couldn't get out. It's one of these enormous big catering things, right?
And they thought
Um,
it was funny.
Not only did he think it was funny, she was the only woman in the brigade at that point in time, and all of them thought it was funny, and they left her in there for quite a while before one of them came in and pulled her back out again. Um, but that's bullying.
Mhm.
That's just that's not right. And you know, when she made a complaint about it, she was accused of not being a team player, which is the biggest load of bollocks that I've ever heard. Unfortunately, she was in another country at the time because and she only told us the story quite a while later. Otherwise, I would have, clearly those people's parents didn't teach them how to be decent human beings. So they would need somebody to come and beat the hell out of them to teach them a lesson about that. But it's not only this industry. Whatever industry, unless your daughter is going to live the life of a hermit on an island somewhere and paint or something like that, raise bunnies. I know you love the bunnies, but she's going to go into the workplace one day. What advice are you going to give her? I mean, it can't just be that it's all on you to have to do countermeasures to overcome this. That can't be the magic. There's got to be, the whole show is about trying to find the magic, and I'm struggling because I'm angry that over the decades of your working career, all that you can say is that awareness has increased, but behavior not changed much, if
Mhm.
at all, in some places.
Hasn't. I'll tell you this. That one time when I did encounter this experience and the client sponsored dinner, actually one a few of our mutual friends were there. That was actually the reason why I was there. And there were plenty of people that were around me and no one did anything.
That's
And so I had to go to the bathroom, hide myself, and I had to text someone. So, um, is it going to change? Maybe. I don't know. Do I have hope that our industry will change? Absolutely not. Is there something else that we can do? Not a whole lot. Look at how many women there are as bank CEOs. Look at how many women there are as head of fintechs. Look at how many women we have been losing. It's purely it's a power play. It is a power play. People feel entitled. They can do certain things. People feel entitled. They can demand certain things. People feel that they can do something if if you're not part of it, then you're just too stuffy, right? You're not a team player. That's what people always say. Oh, it's nothing. It's downplaying how you make people feel, not your actions. And do you want to be part of it or you don't want to be part of it? If you don't butt out, that's basically what the message is, isn't it?
so. I believe that the way that we change it is we change it. I'm
Blown you.
pointing the finger. It's on me. It's on me and the people that I interact with. It really does come down to that. If if I do nothing, that's what this is where these monsters will thrive and survive because people aren't shining the light on it. I mean, I and that's why I don't shy away from covering a topic like this, even though people might have expected you to talk about the monsters of the metaverse, which I'm sure there are loads of. And actually, maybe we do another one another time on that. But this is important, this, because I know that people are dismissive about other people's opinions in the room until Well, even after they've proven their credentials. I know that my daughter, as a female CEO, has to work not twice as hard as a man to have her voice heard around a boardroom table, but 5, 10 times as hard, because she's got to break so many biases and belief systems in people's heads that, oh, but she's just a young girlie, isn't she? What the hell does she know about that? She runs rings around people in a technological discussions. She's had
But
to.
that's precisely that, right? You can't be too young because otherwise you're inexperienced. You cannot be too old because you're out of date. You can't show up as too fat because I've been called a fat soul. You can't show up not dressed properly, even though I've seen plenty of men who would gladly go on stage with shorts and, running shoes. We are held to a completely different standard. That's not even feasible because some of them are contradicting. You need to be assertive to be a leader, but yet you cannot be too much. Otherwise, you're bossy. You need to speak up. Otherwise, you don't get heard. But if you speak up too much, you get dismissed. Where do we draw the line now? Right? It's nothing is ever enough. Nothing is ever good enough. And that's the monster because we don't have the power. The people who can affect change are not standing up. They're not doing anything. So those who have power remain in power because they don't have incentive to change.
I'm writing down those in power.
I'm going
No.
to charge you for it later.
I, I mean,
but isn't it true though, right? That's the frustrating part is I started out, I'll tell you a story. I started out in college, and I shared this many times. I spent 4 years in college being told that, the only reason why I was there is because I'm a woman and Asian. Check 2 boxes done. And then I remember after graduating, I did engineering degree for a completely different reason, just to prove that I could do it. And then I started in a company. That was my second company, and I loved it because it was a space that I met 2 people, genuinely amazing men, and that's why I caution myself and say it's not always about men; it's about predators with power. The first man, he was my boss, and I told someone that in a recent interview because I thought of his actions often when there were rumors that we're going to have a layoff. This was back in the 90s. He told HR, he said, if your guys are going to have to lay off people from my team, lay me off and not Theo because Theo's younger, and it's going to be harder for her to find a job in the downturn. And he told me that afterwards, of course, and I found out, and none of us got laid off, but that had a profound impact on me because someone stepped up, right? Someone stepped up. Someone in the position of power stepped up to change something. And then afterwards, shortly thereafter, one of the sales manager in the company, when it came time to present a product in an industry conference in Clemson University, he came to me. And I'd only been in the company for like maybe a little over a year. And he said, Theo, I want you to do the presentation. I'm like, are you kidding me? Like, industry conference for spectrophotometer. That was my industry, measure color. You want me to present? He was like, yeah, you should, because I've done this many times. You had never done it. You should try it. Someone genuinely extending and sharing the power with someone. I don't think I've ever seen that ever since then. I had not. Right. And so, yes, we could change, but there were not enough people who are willing to change. There are not enough people who are willing to be decent human beings to step up and change the status quo because they still benefit from it. Why would you change something if you're still drawing benefits from it?
the people do exist. Um, we've just got to find a way to find them. There are very few people who um, I have repeated this to. I was approached to put my name forward for a non-executive director position in a financial services company, and um, I was basically told, look, the position is yours. You've just got to make a formal application. And I had a look at their board, their exec board, and I then phoned up the headhunter and I said, not only will I not be putting my name forward, but I sincerely suggest that you have a conversation with the CEO and the chairman of the board, and you get some diversity on your agenda, on your board, because I've looked at your board and I've looked at the next level of management below, and that is in total 27 people, out of which one was woman and one was a person of color.
Lovely token.
And oh, yeah, but such a low token, it's just not even worthwhile considering. And my wife was quite upset with me at the time because we've been going through some serious financial difficulties, and the job would have made a huge impact. And I went, I don't know whether it's, the way my folks raised me or whatever, but I have a very strong moral compass. I also have a very close friendship group who share a very strong moral compass. And I said that I could probably have got the job and the money would have helped significantly, but I couldn't have lived with myself. I just couldn't have done it. So the the job has gone to somebody else, and it was a woman that they picked, with the full support of the chairman, who had already actually um, had a few words with the CEO. But that's not the first time that I've done it. I've pulled myself out of application processes when it's come down to the wire on something, and I've gone, I don't deserve this because it would be taking the job away from somebody who actually should have a voice, and people are giving me the opportunity because of my past and my history, and that's not going to sit well with me morally. So I've stopped applying for corporate positions anymore, and I actively try and change people's minds, um, and actively support and speak out. I'm too old and cranky to keep what I feel to myself now. I really, what have I got to lose if I'm just going to open my fat gob and say something? But the thing that I think is a bit of magic, that I do think we can end this on a slightly positive note, although we haven't got the magic to share. Um, there was a blog written by a mutual friend of ours, back in June. Do you remember Leda Glyptus's story about the war fries?
I did. When she walked out of the restaurant.
And everybody, as one,
Followed.
got up and walked out. And it was, I'll drop a link in the show notes because it's both funny, but also, yeah, it's funny because Leda's a really good storyteller. I'm envious of her storytelling capability, and I pride myself in being a pretty good storyteller myself. But Leda takes it to the next level. I love her stories. So she weaves a good tale, but in it is always a good moral kick in the nuts. Um, and that's what this one was about, was the core. The moral of the story is it doesn't have to happen to you for you to understand that it's wrong. When you see something and you know it's wrong, the biggest thing that you can do is support the wronged person. And in that particular story, everybody, even the one person who hadn't actually seen the incident, they understood leader had been wronged, therefore they as a group had been wronged, and they all stood up and they all walked out. And it's about allyship. And I call upon all of those good people who to date have sat around doing nothing when they see the kind of things happening, whether it's somebody being dismissive about another person's opinion or point of view or capability simply because of who they are. And that doesn't mean that simply because who they are because they are female. It could be who they are because they come from another country, who they are because they speak with a different language, who they are because they don't like Star Wars. No, actually, that's inexcusable. But you see it all the time when people in power or with the power to change a course of events in an organization or in life, when the people around them do nothing when they know that something is fundamentally and morally wrong, the good people have got to stand up and be counted. And I hope that the people that know me will count me in those, but let's get more of us together. The next time that you're at dinner and you want an ally, please don't leave before dessert. It's the best part. We've gone on for 40 minutes, which is longer than we normally go on. We haven't got...
I'm sorry.
No, that's absolutely fine. The frustration is not having a specific piece of magic. If you had to give one strong message to people in leadership positions, what would it be? What would you like to say to all of those, besides the absolutely blatant obvious, don't be a dick?
Be a human.
Be human.
That's it. Just be human.
Not just be
It's
a good
simple. No, just be human. You don't, like you say, you don't have to have lived through those experiences. Just be human.
empathy.
We're not machines.
Thank you.
See, you knew you were gonna get a different answer out from me for Monsters of Myth. But I'm not for conventional answers. So there you have it.
That's all fantastic. Theo, thank you so much for coming on the show. I will put links that people can get hold of you, and in the show notes, I'll put your LinkedIn, I'll put your website, I'll put your podcast, anything else that you want to, maybe even a link to your latest book. Thank you very much
Thank you.
for a deep discussion on a topic that needs to be spoken more about, so we can move that needle before your daughter gets into the work environment, because I'd hate her to live through what you've gone through so far. Thank you for coming on the show.
Thank you for having me, Andrew.